Hello there. Hello there. Uh, Hopefully you can hear me. This is our first time doing a live feed here, and it's my first time doing a live too. So thank you for bearing with me as I sort through some of the technical challenges. Um, so I am here with you today with Starkel Nutrition. My name is Heather Brummer. I am a nutritionist. I'm also an acupuncturist. Um, just so you know my background. what I wanted to do today, what we wanted to do today and with this series is to offer, what we can for folks. We realize that these are unprecedented, unusual times for all of us. And we wanted to offer our knowledge, our services, how we can. So whether or not you can join us right here and now with our live feed, or if you want to tune in later, please feel free and count us as a resource. That's what we want to be, is offer ourselves as a resource and give hopefully some helpful and useful information for this time. So what I really wanted to talk about today, I want to answer any questions that you have, and you're welcome to jump in with those at any time. But what I really wanted to make sure I offered for you today is some simple tricks, some simple ways to help you. I focused it on managing blood sugars, and I hope by the end of this time you'll feel like it's relevant and useful. I'm just checking here in the comments here. I want to make sure people can hear me first and foremost. I normally do this with a headset on, and if people are having trouble hearing me, I can put that on if that makes my audio more clear. Looks like people are doing okay with that. So I wanted to talk about blood sugars today because it's really important for a lot of reasons in our health long term, but really more immediately, they can have a big impact in how we feel and how we function. So, managing blood sugars has a big impact on our brain as well as on our body. And the reasons why, okay, so I guess I'll start at the beginning and give you some information about that. So when blood sugars are well balanced, we are not only able to fuel our body well, but also our brain. And also we're more able to think clearly and make better choices, or feel more clear about making choices. So, I guess I'll give you a quick physiology lesson. How's that? So when blood sugar levels fluctuate, right? Sometimes we can experience a low blood sugar moment in our stomach, and we can feel hungry from our stomach. Other times, though, we may not actually experience hunger cues coming from our stomach. We might actually experience it coming from our brain. Because our brain is actually the one organ in our body that cannot store fuel from earlier times for later use. So when blood sugar levels drop, our brain is actually the first thing that picks up on that. And it picks up on that in a very characteristic way. First of all, we sort of turn off the higher reasoning centers of our brain. The prefrontal cortex is offline, because that's actually not particularly important in that moment. What's more important, according to our brain, is that, we don't have enough fuel, and that's a problem. So it actually detects that the same way as if a bear had just walked across your path. It determines that is a life-threatening problem. And when that happens, the automatic brain kicks in. And when the automatic brain kicks in, it's a very old part of the brain, and it triggers some automatic responses in the body. And one of the first and perhaps most important pieces of that is that it brings some adrenaline online. And it does that for a couple of reasons, but really it's helping you to fight or flight the threat. And in this case, your brain actually can't really tell the difference between whether or not a bear just walked into your room or across your path, or your blood sugars just dropped. Your brain doesn't know the difference. It just knows something's really wrong and it needs to respond. So adrenaline is on the scene to help your body respond to that. And one of the things that it does is it helps to mobilize some fuel. That's one of the primary reasons that your brain is doing that, or that your body is doing that, excuse me. It helps to mobilize some fuel so you can respond to the threat. A side effect from that is that when adrenaline is on the scene, it can it's certainly going to turn off your appetite, right? Because if you're fighting or flighting from a threat, you can't also be thinking about hunger. So your hunger goes away, and it is perhaps harder to think long-term or think with your prefrontal cortex, with the part of your brain that has that does the higher reasoning and thinking long-term and keeping your long-term goals in mind, whatever they may be. Can't really access that. So adrenaline is helping you assess this threat, make a decision, take action, and move on very quickly. The part of the brain that's involved with this, that automatic brain that's triggering all of this, is also really tightly enmeshed with the emotional center. So it's not uncommon that when a person is experiencing this kind of threat, this low blood sugar moment, the brain perceives will tend to have an emotional response to that as well. And that emotional response can be feeling anxious, feeling irritable, having a hard time focusing, having a hard time maybe having a stronger emotional reaction to something. So it can feel incredibly disorienting if you're trying to keep your feet under you, if you're trying to manage everything that's going on in the world, if you're having some low blood sugar, and if you're having, it may be exacerbating a tendency already that a person has for experiencing anxiety or for feeling feelings of managing emotions. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about blood sugars. And there's some very simple ways to do this. And the first thing you want to keep in mind is it's incredibly important to eat regularly. And regularly is like every 3 hours, regularly. It doesn't necessarily mean you want to sit down and have a meal every 3 hours, but you do want to eat, and you want to eat solid food. I made a face because there's a lot of definitions of that. It's really important to have the components that are going to help you best in managing blood sugars is having protein and having a good source of fiber. You can do it with either one by themselves, but they really work well together to slow down the rate of digestion of food through the stomach, through the digestive system. You can think of it almost like they act as if like a time release capsule. It slows down the digestive process. It slows down how quickly that fuel gets dumped into the system, into the circulatory system. And that makes it easier to stay out of that low blood sugar state. So protein at meals, protein at snacks. A meal is going to be bigger than a snack, but a meal should help a person feel full for about 3 hours, or at least maybe you don't feel full in your stomach, but you can think clearly for 3 hours. And a snack is going to be smaller, so that would be an hour and a half to 2 hours that fuel should stick with you. And that might feel particularly challenging right now when we have so much stress. These are not usual times. And so it can be particularly useful as you're able to set some structure for yourself around this. Set your alarm on your phone. If you're sitting in front of your computer, set the computer alarm to go off every 3 hours. After a meal, set it to go off after 3 hours. After a snack, set it to go off for about an hour and a half. Check in with yourself and say, ask you, am I hungry? And you might feel it here, you might feel it here. And if you feel it anywhere, eat, of course. But just I wanted to give that information that it doesn't always show up in the stomach. And in fact, the longer we go without eating, it's less likely to show up in the stomach. Adrenaline comes on the scene. It squelches the appetite. So a person's not necessarily going to have it show up here. And in fact, it's very common. I will see this happen frequently where a person will say, I was hungry, a few hours after I ate. And then, I just sort of didn't have time to attend to it. I kind of ignored it and it went away and I didn't even feel hungry anymore. And off I went for hours and hours longer. That's a great sign that adrenaline's been on the scene. And, to some extent, I could make the argument that that's how we may all operate in our culture. It's just going to make it more challenging to stay here in the decision-making part of the brain if we perpetually stay in that state. So right now, as everything is abnormal and you're home in a really, really different capacity than you want to be, than you're used to being, it's important to set that structure for yourself if you can. And now you're probably saying, yeah, my problem is that I feel like I'm grazing all day. I just feel like I'm eating constantly. And that is, then I might encourage you to set the same structure for yourself to make sure that you are getting a meal. Make sure that you aren't just snacking all day, that you are getting a good amount of protein at regular intervals. And if you need a ballpark range, you can ballpark as a general rule, look for about 3 ounces of a protein at a meal. If you're looking at labels with foods that you've got at your disposal, that's around 20 grams, 21 grams of protein. You can think of that as a solid amount as a rule for a meal. A snack could vary. It could be 7 to 14 grams. 7 grams would look like an ounce of nuts, just to give you a working idea of that. So if you find yourself grazing all day, if you find yourself munching on chips, you're munching on bagels, you're munching on bread, you're anything carby, right? The carby craving, I said I would talk about that. That, there's actually really... There's so much smart physiology going on. We're driven a lot by our physiology. And one of the reasons we can crave carbs is because we're stressed. I don't think you needed me to tell you that. We're stressed. But one of the things that happens when we do eat carbs is that, blood sugar levels go up. It's one of the fastest ways to get your fueling level up. That's what blood sugars are. It's your available fuel. It's a useful, good thing, right? So you eat something high in carbohydrate, we're able to digest it. Blood sugar levels go up quick and easy. Insulin levels go up quick and easy. Normal, healthy, happy response. We want our bodies to do that. When insulin levels are elevated, one of the things that happens is that we're able to get more of some amino acids in the brain that help us build more serotonin. And serotonin is this fantastic neurotransmitter that helps us know we're going to be okay. So now all of a sudden, it makes a lot of sense that we're craving carbs when we're stressed out because we want to know we're going to be okay. That's a really appropriate thing to want to know. And so if a person finds themselves craving carbs or just reaching for snacky foods, check in. Am I okay? Do I feel like I need some comfort? Do I need to know in some way that I'm okay? Has it been 7 hours since I've eaten anything? The first place to check is, when was the last time I ate? Did I get some protein? Did I get something solid to eat? And making sure that you kind of head those cravings off at the pass. When you do have some good fueling in your body and in your system, you can say, okay, so I can tend to go for a long time without eating. Maybe I can make sure I've got some snacks at the ready for myself, so I don't have to think in those moments what are a good thing to eat. And maybe when you're well fed, you can think of, one other thing that might bring you comfort in those moments that wouldn't be food. We can't think of those things in those moments of distress. We're in distress. We can't necessarily problem solve as well. So one food item, one non-food item that you find nourishing. So that's where carb cravings can come from, and they can actually be a really useful tool. And then the third thing I said I would just check in or touch bases on is how to keep, how to keep moving. Oh boy, particularly unique situations we are all in around that, and we can think about exercise and the power of exercise for the brain for helping to manage anxiety and stress. Exercise can help bring cortisol, which I didn't even mention that. Cortisol is one of the ways our body expresses stress physiologically. And it's appropriate, like everything, it's appropriate to have some, but having too much can be disruptive. And exercise can help keep that balanced. Exercise can help your body balance blood sugars. Exercise can help your brain function optimally. There's enormous amounts of research on that, and I won't bore you with those volumes. But the brain prefers to be in a moving body. So it makes a lot of sense if you're feeling really frustrated being cooped up, that you want to exercise and maybe you can't get out to exercise. And you don't have to relegate yourself to the couch completely. Getting up every hour and walking in place, marching in place for 2 minutes can give you up to 300 steps. 300 steps. So then if you do that over the course of the day, over a 6-hour day, you're going to work your way towards 5,000 steps, if I did that math correctly. And if I didn't, I apologize. But it adds up quickly. 10,000 steps is 5 miles. So you can do simple things like getting up every hour and marching in place. Also, if you're having these really, moments of more acute moments of stress, let's say, it can be incredibly helpful to physically release that, right? We want to get that out of our system. It's the body saying, hey, I'm fighting or flighting. And when it's been a bear that we're fighting or flighting, we're going to punch it. Maybe not the best choice. We're going to fight it or we're going to flight it, right? We're physiologically ready for a response. So there can be times for having just a little bit higher intensity exercise, and you maybe can't get outside to go for a run, depending on where you live and your situation. You can, there's a lot of free exercise apps, and if you'd like some resources around that, I'm certainly happy to provide those. But even doing some jumping jacks, running in place instead of walking in place. If your body is able, doing push-ups or burpees for very short periods of time, just little short intense bursts can help dispel some of that stress hormone, help your brain, help your body utilize the fuel that you've got in there efficiently, and help you keep your feet under you. Because not a one of us has asked to be in this situation, right? Like nobody took this time off to be at home, to get projects done around their house, or to cross items off their bucket list. I mean, it's wonderful if that can happen. And it's not necessarily what this time is. This is an incredibly stressful time. So hopefully you'll find some use in some of these, I think, simple tricks, tips to help you manage the stress and the challenges, the really unique challenges of this time. So I'd love to open this up if anybody has any questions. I just want people to know that we're here for you. And if you're not able to watch this live and you're able to watch this later and you think of questions, you can absolutely send those our way. And you can also know that we're going to be doing this every week. And each one of us may have a slightly different focus, but feel free to ask questions as they come up. And we're here to support each other. We're here to support you as well as we can. All right. I'm just looking through the questions here to see what kinds of questions there might be. Let me see here. There's some older questions that came up while I was talking, so I apologize. And if people would like for me to go through those, I could do that. Or if there's a pressing question that you're sure you want me to circle back to, please, if you wouldn't mind retyping it so I know that you'd really like me to address it. But otherwise, I can just start at the top. How's that sound? Okay. Let's see here. Okay, so somebody said that they like having a couple of cookies at snack time. Is that bad for blood sugar? Is an apple better? If not, what else can I eat for a snack? That's a great question. It's so challenging to figure out what in the world am I supposed to eat. If you can think for a snack, I mentioned protein. Protein's so important because it really, excuse me, it really is effective at keeping blood sugars from rising too quickly. So that might be, depending on what you have access to, that could be a tablespoon of peanut butter or a nut butter of your choice. That might be a hard-boiled egg if you prefer something like that. It could be a couple of bites of tuna fish left over from lunch if you weren't able to finish lunch, or if you have that left over. It could be a few bites of, well, I guess those are the ones that really pop to mind. If you can, pairing that with some food that's high in fiber is going to help that last and stick with you longer. So pairing some nut butter with an apple or a piece of fruit that's high in fiber is going to be supportive of blood sugars a little bit longer. Now, if you're finding it challenging to get fruit in your local market right now, one idea for keeping a couple of high fiber options in the cupboard are unsweetened applesauce and jars of artichoke hearts. They're both very high in fiber. There's no added sugar, and they're shelf stable. So we could come up with some interesting recipes for artichoke hearts. So hopefully that feels useful there. Okay, lots of confirmations you can hear me. Thank you so much. What else do we have here? What foods can cause my blood sugars to rise? Great question. Generally, it can be foods that are, I can say added sugars, and that feels really vague, and there's a lot of foods that may fall into that category. So foods that are lacking fiber is one of the ways to think about. It's a different way to think about the same problem. So it's hard to say eat this amount of fiber in the same way I can say eat this amount of protein, because it can vary. It can vary a bit. You're hard pressed to get too much fiber. You can get too much all at once if you're not used to eating a lot of it. But anyway, foods that can cause blood sugars to rise might, they're going to be foods that are high in carbohydrates. They're going to be foods where the fiber has been removed. And so more often, so thinking about refined versus unrefined carbs, all carbohydrates are not necessarily created equal. And the more intact a grain can be, the better the impact will be for managing blood sugar. So I like to use oats as an example, just quickly. If we think about an oat growing out in the field versus an instant oatmeal, there's a whole range of what that can look like in terms of being refined. And so the closest to how you're going to find that food as you would find it in nature would be a steel cut oat. It's literally the grain physically chopped up a bit so it cooks a little faster. So that's going to have the most fiber intact. That's going to have the best, it's going to do the best job at managing blood sugar. And then we might then look at an old-fashioned oat, which has been a little bit of the fiber has been removed. It's been pressed, it's been processed slightly and very, very, very slightly cooked. That's going to have more fiber intact, but not quite as much as the steel cut oats. And then from there, we could look at an instant oatmeal. And from an instant oatmeal, it's going to be actually more of the fiber is going to be removed. It's going to be a bit more processed, so it will have a bit higher impact, more of an impact in blood sugar. It will get digested more quickly than a steel cut oat that has all of that fiber intact. And then from there, we might look at an oat-based cereal where it doesn't really resemble at all how you might find that grain in nature. And that's going to generally have the biggest impact on blood sugars. That's going to get digested and turned into fuel very quickly. So hopefully that's a useful guideline for how to identify which foods are going to be supportive of blood sugar. Generally speaking, the more it resembles how you would find that food in nature, the better impact it will have for managing blood sugars because the fiber is going to stay intact. Let's see. So we've got some family members who are at university, and what should they do to maximize their brain power? Oh gosh, there's lots and lots of things. Eat regularly, get lots of protein, exercise regularly, and sleep. Is that specific enough? I'd love to know more about that question. If there's more to that question, I'm happy to answer that. Is there anything I can eat along with a sugary snack or dessert to keep my blood sugars more level? That absolutely, I actually don't advocate that people skip desserts completely. It's really important for a lot of reasons to keep those in the diet and keep those in the rotation. And as this question is illuminating, it can be part of a balanced diet and for lots of non-physiological reasons, but here more specifically physiologically, making sure that you're having a dessert or a favorite treat in conjunction with a meal is going to help it's going to help your body use that most efficiently. It's going to have the least impact on blood sugars because you've already got a lot of good fuel in the body. You're not going to be digesting just your favorite piece of cake by itself, which your body will turn into fuel very quickly and easily. So not to sound like a broken record, I was trying to figure out how to say it without using the P word, but making sure that you're having your favorite dessert with a meal that includes protein and also high fiber is going to help. It's going to help your body. It's going to lessen that blood sugar impact. And also you're likely to eat a little bit less of it, which can also help manage blood sugars. Let's see. Does this craving happen with the carbs in vegetables? Oh, do you mean like, I'm going to rephrase it, see if I'm answering the question properly. If you have vegetables, will you tend to have these blood sugar fluctuations, or will you tend to have sugar or carb cravings? And that's the question that I think I'm hearing in that. It's less likely as a rule because of the fiber that's in there. It's, I can talk a lot about protein and how it increases the satiety of a meal, where there's chemical signaling from the stomach to the brain that's more effective and efficient when there's protein in your stomach. So it's a very real physiologic thing. It's also a very real physiologic thing with fiber. If you were to just have a meal of meat and cheese, or meat, just protein, you're probably going to find yourself feeling unsatisfied and continuing to reach for foods. In part because you might not actually get enough of blood sugar. We do digest proteins. They do bump up blood sugars and insulin, but not the same as carbs. So in some cases, people don't get their blood sugars up enough, and that can perpetuate cravings and feeling unsatisfied. But just to answer your question here around vegetables, it's less likely to happen because they have so much more fiber in them. And fiber is digested more slowly. It slows down the gastric emptying from your stomach and helps a person feel fuller for longer, which the types of foods that are going to spike blood sugars are the ones that are digested quickly, turned into fuel really quickly. And that doesn't tend to happen as much in vegetables because of the fiber. So what are some good vegetarian options for protein snacks besides nuts? That's a fantastic question. I hope that you're aware of and are comfortable with soy as an option, edamame, tempeh, tofu. In some cases, soy milk, people can do really well with those. If you don't feel comfortable consuming soy, then beans can be fantastic. Other sources of beans can be fantastic. And there's some really interesting creative ways you can use beans for some bean salads, or even mixing in some grains. Those are what are popping to mind right now. I'm sure I'll think of something else shortly after I sign off. And if I think of that, I will post it for you. Let's see here if I've got any other questions. I keep hearing breakfast is really important to eat. Can you talk about why? And what are some options for people who don't like to have a big breakfast? That's a fantastic question. I appreciate that. So breakfast, oh boy, there's not a lot of times I toe the company line around this, but I do around breakfast. It is one of the most important meals of the day. It's not very often I sound like a commercial. So breakfast is particularly important. Oh, in most bodies, truly in most bodies, but particularly if we're trying to manage ourselves in times of stress, whether acute or chronic. It's important because it sets our body up for proper fueling for the day, in most particular because it helps us to manage cortisol for the day. And I didn't really go into a lot of detail around this, and that can be a whole other conversation, but just very briefly, cortisol is a very important hormone our body secretes in response to stress. And by the way, it's highest in the morning because waking up is naturally a very stressful event. So that's really our body's way of getting us up and online, and it naturally drops off over the course of the day. So what can happen, however, when we have a lot of stress and that signaling gets a little cattywampus, we can support our body's stress response by making sure we're staying well and properly fueled throughout the day. One of the things cortisol is doing physiologically is helping to supply fuel throughout the day, and it doesn't meddle in with blood sugar management, but it kind of does. It gets its fingers in there and gets involved with that. So if we're fueling ourselves very regularly with good blood sugar support, it takes some of the work off cortisol and starts to take some of the work off. Cortisol is secreted by your adrenal glands, which are two little glands. They sit on top of your kidneys, and it takes some of the work off of your adrenals to support apply cortisol, excuse me. So it can give you good fueling for the day. And then the next question, part of that question is, can you talk about why and what are some options for people who don't like to have a big breakfast? So this is, it's so interesting. I've seen this a lot. I know I feel like a little bit of a broken record, but I've seen this clinically happen quite a bit. When we don't have very good blood sugar management and we're not used to eating regularly, or we don't get enough protein throughout the day, and then maybe we're eating very late at night, or maybe we're not eating very late at night, whatever is happening with sleep, we can wake up the next morning feeling very really not hungry. And what can happen, this may or may not include waking up in the middle of the night, but what can happen is if we are not fueling, we're not giving our body good fueling through the day, then we're having a low blood sugar moment. We're having low blood sugar times over the course of the night. That can actually contribute to waking up in the middle of the night. It's actually a low blood sugar moment because your brain wakes up thinking something really terrible is happening. And you might wake up with all of the terrible things going through your head at 3 a.m. of, oh my goodness, right? The committee's up and running at 3 a.m. and you're like, I'd like to be sleeping now. This is not the time for this. That can very, very frequently be a low blood sugar moment. And if you wait it out a couple of hours, you might get back to sleep. You might not get back to sleep. Pro tip, if you'd like it, make sure if you have that tendency, have a little bit of protein before you go to bed. 30 minutes before you go to bed, have a tablespoon of a nut butter. Something very, very small, very simple. And or have a snack. Maybe, again, I know I rely on nuts. They're just very shelf stable because you don't ever know when that's going to happen. Have a small handful of nuts, maybe a few pieces of dried fruit that are mixed in next to your bed. So if you wake up at 3 a.m, have this small snack right there ready to go. A little bit of water, wash it down. 20, 30 minutes, you're back to sleep. But all of this is to say, then a person can wake up and just not be hungry. And it's important to listen to your body. It's important to eat when you're hungry. And I don't always advocate eating when you're not hungry. But some of that, very, very frequently, that can be a person's body not regulating, not having good fueling regularly. So start with something very simple. Some people do well with eggs. Some people can't go anywhere near eggs until noon. Some people can't digest eggs no matter what time of the day. Their bodies don't like it. If you're really struggling with hunger in the morning, I do encourage trying to get into a routine, you're really training your body to have some fuel about an hour after waking, or within an hour, but about an hour after waking. And this is when some smoothies or a liquid-based meal, smoothie with a protein powder in it, can be really helpful because it's a lot easier to digest liquid food. And it can feel more it can just feel more comfortable and more satisfying if you're really not hungry first thing in the morning. That can be a good place to start. There's a question here that is, does it affect blood sugar? Let me see if I can. It looks like that is an add-on thought to another question. Deborah, if you feel like I need to answer that question, I'm happy to. I just am not sure fully what your question is, so please ask again. You're welcome. I'm glad that the vegetarian options felt like that was an adequate answer. Happy to do that. I have that. You're welcome. I'm glad this is helpful so far. Let's see. We've still got a little bit of time. I'm happy to spend it here with you. And again, I really do want to emphasize that whenever you hear this talk or any of them, we're going to be doing these every week. Should be right around this same exact time, give or take a half an hour, but I think we're going to try to keep it consistent around 12:30 on Wednesdays. Oh, Deborah, thank you. Okay, I will answer that question. I just to finish my finish my first thought. We're going to be doing this really regularly. So if you do think of a question, or you have a question off of this that you don't think of until next week, we're going to be here regularly for you. We're not going anywhere. Okay, so the question here is, I asked, how late in the day should I eat? That's a fantastic question. A little bit. It depends. That's my most annoying answer. No, it depends a little bit when your bedtime is. It's not value. I just said it's nice to have a little bit of a snack before you go to bed. But as a rule, you don't necessarily want to have a big meal before you go to bed. And really, you want to give your body two to 3 hours from your last meal before you go to bed. So, if you're trying to get to bed around 9 or 9:30 and maintain a routine that you might be used to having, trying to have dinner around 5:30 or 6 would be a good time. And then if you do find that happening, well, if you find yourself a little bit hungry before you go to bed, about 30 minutes, have a little snack. Maybe you don't like nut butters. Maybe you've got some hard-boiled eggs in the refrigerator. Have a hard-boiled egg. Or if you find yourself with that problem of waking in the middle of the night, try it a few nights. Try that trick a few nights in a row and see if that makes a difference for you. Question about protein powders. Yeah, that's a great question. There are a lot of protein powders out there. I hate that answer. It depends, but it kind of depends. Some bodies do fantastic with whey protein. There's enormous amounts of research on it. And for the people that can tolerate it, it's a great choice. It's affordable. It's widely available. And P.S., a note on protein powders, not that you overtly asked, that can be a really handy tool to have in your toolkit right now, to just have that in your cupboard of whatever kind your body can digest well, whether it's collagen or whey. Maybe it's a plant-based hemp or a pea protein, depending on your body. That's it. We're challenged with all of the problems we're trying to solve right now, and figuring out what to eat all the time shouldn't be one of them, but kind of is. So give yourself a break and have some easy go-to things available. So if you just can't think of what you should be doing because there's so many other things that are really demanding your decision-making processes, have some ready-made decisions for you. And a protein powder in the cupboard can be incredibly handy. If nothing else, you can have it with, in a glass of water. If all else fails, for a snack anytime. Now, one other question. Can you tell us a bit more about what I do, what I specialize in, and when and how can someone come to see me? I love to talk about blood sugars, obviously. I've worked a lot with managing blood sugar. I've worked a lot with it in the context of preventing diabetes and supporting people who do have diabetes. I worked a lot for people who are interested in having a better understanding and better control in their mood health, in their cognitive health. That's included some addiction recovery work as well. Some of that is overlapped with my acupuncture skills, which I'm not using right at this moment overtly, but the knowledge infuses everything that I do. I've done an enormous amount of work for folks who are looking for support around sustainable weight health and weight, which can include weight loss, as well as how do I approach this part of my health with some empowerment and sustainability. I'm tired of the up and down, and I really want to understand this for myself moving forward. And that's a process. That's a process. One that I have found to be enormously empowering for people. I have also loved working with folks around stress management and really, the physiologic pieces of stress management, as well as, to some degree, the non-physiologic pieces, because there's a lot of overlap and it's hard to separate them. That's one of the biggest lessons from Chinese medicine, is that the physical and the non-physical are inseparable. So where and how can I make choice? Where do I still have a sense of choice? That is the essence of stress management. But we talk about it in terms of how that impacts your health. How can you continue to make choices and changes and sustain those changes in your health over time? I also do a lot of work with general wellness, and gosh, lots of things, cholesterol and heart health, and I don't want to say you name it, but those are some of the things that spring to mind off the top of my head. If you'd like to see me, you're more than welcome to see me. We're all telehealth right now because that's the world we live in. We do take insurance. We take most insurances. And you can certainly check us out at starkelnutrition.com and find out about getting more information for booking an appointment with me. You might look through all of our wonderful practitioners and decide somebody else might help you better with some of your special concerns, because we do have some wonderful specialists. So, and when can you come see me? At the moment, I've got a lot of flexibility. Most of my appointments are on Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays, but office availability is pretty wide open right now. So if those days don't work for you, let me know. We'll see what we can work out. It looks like I have answered everybody's questions. So I will just take this moment then and thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your attention. For all of this time, it's been 45 minutes. You've listened to me ramble, so I appreciate that. Hopefully not all rambling. Hopefully some of it felt useful. And be gentle and be kind with yourselves. More gentle than you think you might normally be. These are unusual times. They'll pass. We'll get through it. And keep showing up. Stay connected. Thank you so much for being here.